I should say. Some contribution to everybody for time incurred looking and engaging with the database and relocation opportunities, time taken around restocking, time taken disposing, time taken of physical moving. If I could just, I'll come back to the allocation process in a moment, because just to frame that in terms of the map and the clustering question, I couldn't disagree with anything that's been said around the fact that in that map there is not one single cluster that replaces the Elephant and Castle current floor space. Those 4 clusters represent sort of the best efforts that we have so far, and we'll continue to try and bring more space forward and trying to create 4 sort of mini clusters as represented on that map. So what that means is going forward with the independent advice from Tree Shepherd and any consultation with council officers that they require, we expect traders to have to make a decision on are those affordable units suitable, what endeavours they'll have to make to go into the commercial market as well, because it is true that that total amount of affordable space on the map, which is separate to the policy compliant affordable space, I should say, that amount of affordable space is less than the total for there's only parity. For the floor space. There's only parity of floor space quite near the end of the process when the centre is open again. So traders will have to make a decision about how they approach these, whether they want to go for one of these units, whether they want to explore the commercial process. Now, given that it's clearly advantageous to try and get an affordable unit, one of the things that will have to happen quite quickly, but it will have to happen from scratch in terms of at least the beginning of thinking about it, is that each trader will have a different need and a different wish of what kind of unit they want, and also, unfortunately, what kind of unit will be available. There will be some that will have to look at commercial, some that will have to look at affordable units in the first instance when thinking about this cluster, and then that changes when affordable units come online when the shopping centre is rebuilt. I think I can imagine a number of scenarios. Traders may want to think about this individually as a business. They may want to confederate into smaller groups and have someone and represent themselves in smaller groups. They may well wish to sign up to a number of organisations who are able to represent them more collectively. But it's still true that they'll have to make that decision based on what is available now. The map is essentially a snapshot, if you like, of what is available now. And then we're also going to we're going to look to add to it. And we're not talking about Paranet, but there's other things that we are trying to examine and bring on board. And also, it's also true that the traders will have to be, how can I put this? Traders will have to sort of base their thinking on these current assumptions, and then some future projections. Again, we'd like to help with that, but also Tree Shepherd are there to provide some independent advice on what will be available in the future. So, sort of a longer way of saying there's a reason why we've held off fully committing to exactly why and how the funds and clusters are going to be allocated, because there will be competition, certainly for the clusters as is.
Can't say anything other than how it is. Is there any further questions that anyone would want to ask on this particular juncture, or have we explored all the issues? Sorry. Is there any further questions you would like to ask on this subject? Are there any further questions that you'd like to ask on, which one do we have now? The Tabernacle. I'm sort of sympathetic with David's bit about sort of trying to get a condition in terms of the design to ensure that they mitigate any possibility of things tipping over, and I quite like the idea of creating surfaces that are not, you can't put flower pots on, quite frankly, or if you do, they fall into and onto the balcony rather than onto someone's head. And I think that's quite a simple but easy approach, which should be within any design parameter. Sorry, it might spoil a line, but yeah, brilliant.
Chair, just to say there is already a condition in the draft recommendation 64. It's a detailed drawings condition, and there's just a reference in there, safety measures for balcony balustrades, and I think we've improved on that in the addendum as well.
Councillor notes, David cited a list of
I'm going to come to that.
potential. Oh, right. Did you make a note of the?
I made a note of all
Right.
five of them.
So,
One of which I don't understand.
various studies, environmental impact study on water structure, etc., etc. So if you've got the list, then perhaps if the officers can address.
I was going to go through that list. Are there any further questions that we need to ask officers for clarification before we go into that bit about sort of going, and this is what I want, and people start nodding, or well, this is what the committee wants, not what I want, obviously. Hamish and then Adele.
Really quickly, hopefully, the covenant point. Are officers just able to just clarify the impact of that and any potential concerns that might give rise to?
And does the council actually have a policy of 30 years, as was asserted?
The emerging policy P4 requires the private rented units to be held as private rented units for a 30-year period. If they're sold out, if the private rented element's broken up, so if the owner decides to sell off units piecemeal, then that breaks the covenant and triggers the clawback mechanism. The aspiration for 30 years is set out in the emerging New Southwark plan, and that's the position that we took to the applicant as being the preference. However, the applicant assured us that it wouldn't be attractive to investors to go with that length of covenant, being that it's a new emerging sector of the market. So the maximum length that they're able to commit to is a 20-year period.
I ask a question, but I suspect this is an issue that, like a number of things, it is...
Mike, Uncle Nick, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Paul. This is one of those things that is going to be, this is what it is, and this is part of the application before us, and we take our decision based on that rather than try and renegotiate that now.
Okay, well, I will...
Bear that in mind when I make my decision.
No,
No, don't ask a question. I don't want you asking.
Well, no, I mean, so my question is, if we have got 30 years in our emerging policy, and the first people that come along to do a scheme like this can't do 30 years, say it's not doable, why have we got it in our policy? Or why are they saying they can't, or why have we got it in our policy?
Well, it is emerging policy. The aspiration is that as the market strengthens and more schemes come forward, we would be able to push towards a longer covenant length up to the 30-year. But as this is a first scheme, it's testing the market, and the applicant's view is that they wouldn't be able to bring the scheme forward with a longer covenant at this point.
Are there any further questions?
No, that's all right.
So I wanted to ask Vicky to go back to the beginning with the questions about the retail units and getting all of the figures exactly right, because I understand that some of them are not quite right in the report. But also I wanted to ask Richard. So we have got quite a big loss of B1 space, which we wouldn't normally allow. And I know we've got some increases, in a little bit of increase in the retail and the flexible use. There is an increase in the D1, but that is for the university, so that's different. And then we've got a loss of D2. So in terms, homes and jobs is the mantra that we hear all the time. That's why we've got to do planning to approve things because of the homes and jobs. Jobs-wise, how many new jobs are actually going to be created on this, and particularly given with the loss of quite a lot of the B1 use here? There's 500 jobs that are coming with the LCC. She's sorry, I forgot to call you she because I've forgotten her name. Apologies. Has already said that is just relocating people from somewhere else. That's not really new job creation. So I just wondered if you've got some info on that.
That bit is,
Yeah.
and it's not job loss. That's an increase of the number of jobs on the site.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not the creation of new jobs. It's an increase in jobs on the site, but it's not new jobs being created. There's a subtle difference.
Well, it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both.
Yeah, sorry. Proposed development is supposed to create around about 1,200 construction jobs within the 10-year build period, and we've estimated an increase. This site is under 194, increase of between 395 and 572 jobs in the completed development. So there is a net increase. That construction. Those 1,200 construction jobs, that's my other hat, is around negotiating construction jobs and apprentice opportunities over the construction period. So they're secured through 106, and they're delivered by the workplace coordinator who's appointed by an applicant. If they're not delivered, there's a financial penalty against each of those jobs, which is used in different employment schemes.
I was more interested in the jobs in the scheme at the end of it all. As I say, given that there is a significant loss in the B1 space.
So we've got a calculation of between 395 and 572 jobs in the end phase in the completed scheme. Yes. Thanks. Yes, the new jobs. Yeah, that's it. So yes, an increase of jobs.
Okay. Is there any further questions on this bit? Oh, Vicky, yes. Sorry.
Yes, you asked me to clarify the numbers. The correct table is table 1, which is on page 50 of the officer report. There does seem to be an error on table 2 on page 53. Table 1 has been agreed with the applicant, so those figures are correct.
We're all happy with that? Are we happy now, or content at least, to move towards taking a decision?
Can I just, Chair, check that in whatever decision the committee reaches, if the committee decides to approve it, that the both the commitment by the developer to fund a CPZ review in time, and also the commitment that you secured to be open and honest and transparent would be documented within the decision, and not just kind of memory.
Hamish, I shall read out the list that I have made that form the basis of my introduction. Secure parking review, construction management plan strengthened, service plan strengthened, management, the last point that you made clear. I am also, in terms of the notes that I've been making, I am sympathetic to the strengthening the conditioning around, or you telling us the conditioning around the further greening, which was raised in 133, page 133, paragraph 446. The issue about things dropping off the tower, I think, has been addressed, and that will be dealt with. I wasn't entirely sure what was meant by the conditioning the water supply infrastructure. Vicky, looks as if you've got an answer.
Yes, the conditions 15 are for the east side and 62 for the west side from Thames Water.
Brilliant. There was the other comment that David made was the detailed environment management plan. Is that acceptable? He said detailed environment management. Yes.
That would be included in the section 106.
Brilliant. And the last bit was limiting the Sunday opening hours to the usual Sunday opening hours for licensed premises in the area, consistent with similar places, given that I don't go out on a Sunday anymore, or very rarely, and I certainly, no, I don't actually. It will be limited licensing, but be in line with the licensing expectations in the area and stuff that we've done in the past. We've done that. We've got the other one about the secure the parking review, construction management, service plan, deliveries and stuff like that. I have been given a list of things which we certainly expect, and how the strength in which we actually we deal with this. We still need we certainly want to have the confirmation of the 10% of the affordable retail space to be split equally between the sites, and that will be part of a future discussion that John happens. The affordable housing viability reviews, I think that the conversation that we've had and the commitments that the developer has moved in the right direction in terms of establishing how they're going to be conducted in an open way and a continual way, and then the review at the end. Similarly with the review of the tenure split over the 3-year cycle. We've done with the covenant, and it is 20 years, that is what has been asked for. The employment provisions about the construction site, as I have said earlier, best endeavours will feature as part of my discussion, and the legal people would very much prefer that, and I would urge everyone to agree with that. That we've had the extensive issue around the re-provision of bingo, and again the expression best endeavours under the basis of the equalities consideration to make re-provision of bingo, or, and I think this is has got to be there, and getting the approach to the groups with protected characteristics are reflected across the whole of the estate and the management of it, rather than just in the provision of leisure. I think that's pretty much on that. Is there anything further that anyone wishes to add?
Yes, issue around a feasibility study around the wind factor.
Yeah.
I don't know if that comes under the environmental study. I don't know if that would be incorporated. Perhaps if we could receive clarification on that, I'd be grateful.
And mitigation.
Thank you.
That's included as a condition. So it would be a condition on the east site for some additional information, and a condition on the west site for some additional mitigation and some additional testing around the tabernacle as well. And if that testing demonstrates that there's an impact, the developer would have to submit a scheme of mitigation to us.
No. Oh no, you've got to stay. Otherwise we've all got to stop. No, but everyone would have to stop, because you have to be in the room.
Mike, please.
You have to be in the meeting room.
I know, but so can we stop?
Okay, should we take can we take a 5-minute adjournment, please? No, it's...
Go on. If, sorry if we could all... No, it's okay. There are other pressing things at the moment, and... Order!
Right, now that everyone's back, are there any further comments that anyone wishes to make? If you could, make them brief.
There was one other point that came up during the meeting, which was Councillor Merrill asked if the Section 106 agreement could be referred back to a future planning committee.
There is legal advice on that.
I don't think that's ever been done before, so it would be it would be quite a novel route. But strictly speaking,
No, could you please stop interrupting from the rear? Can I just say, we on a regular basis, as a planning authority, we take a series of very complicated, complex issues, and the route is that once we take the decision, is for the officers to work with the applicant to actually ensure the signing off and the agreements that are made in line with the council, the committee's agreement. Otherwise, there would be an argument for every part of every discussion to be reported back to this committee. I'm not entirely sure there is enough time in anyone's day to do this. This is not, while it is of intense interest to a number of people here, we have done very large, very complex developments in the past. Some of them have been in and around the Elephant and Castle. Some of them have been up here, particularly London Bridge Station, which is now coming to a completion. What does happen is that it goes, the director of, planning. The director of planning has the final sign-off under his responsibilities. If something goes so badly that he is unable to sign it off, we will then consider the position. But in the normal course of events, that is the route that we have and this authority has adopted and will continue, as far as I'm concerned, should continue to adopt. Otherwise we break with a well-established route.
Just also going further on that, I mean, this agreement will have to be discussed and negotiated to some extent with the TfL. We are also going to have to submit this agreement to the GLA, and it would be very difficult for us to submit an agreement to the GLA and then decide subsequently that we didn't quite like that agreement. I mean, they expect to see a finished agreement, so it would be very difficult to, in those circumstances, to bring it back to committee.
And I would add that I think really the committee has given some very clear steers on what you want to achieve through the Section 106 agreement. We are instructed by you to ensure that there is a robust and effective review mechanism of the affordable housing provision. We know what the principles are, that we are aiming towards meeting policy compliance with our emerging policy. We know that that's got to be done in an appropriate time with the appropriate mechanism. And we also have clear instructions from you about certain other matters about using best endeavours to secure those measures to cover the needs of those people with protected characteristics. And there are other matters that are, so really the mechanism is for the planning committee to give instructions to officers what they want to achieve, and we will seek to achieve those things in the Section 106 agreement.
Thank you. Are we now happy to go towards a decision? I propose we agree the motion as on paper, as amended in the addendum, and as strengthened by the comments that have come forward during the course of this discussion, and some of which have reflected the direct comments that have come not only from the objectors but have emerged as a consequence of the discussion that has gone on. Is that seconded? Is anyone seconded? Sarah, you seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. All those against, please indicate. All those abstaining, please indicate. So, what was the figures? Sadly, that fails. We now have the vote on the second item. Oh yeah. Oh God, no! We now have to agree the reasons for refusal. No, we haven't got any reasons for refusal. No one has indicated that they were going to put forward a refusal. What are the reasons for refusal? So someone now has to put forward a motion for refusal, following the advice that we get from officers as to whether those reasons for refusal are acceptable in planning grounds.
No.
Yeah.
Had your votes. Had your votes.
That all well and good. You can say what you like from the back, but that is the way we have to do it. The applicant has to be we have to be, as a planning authority, very clear as to what the grounds for refusal are, because they have a right to appeal should they so require. I can also say that the
microphone. Sorry, no, I thought I turned it on. I turned it off. There is also what we need to do is be very clear on the grounds of refusal. So someone has got to put a proposal forward for refusal following discussing the grounds for it. So who's going to put forward a grounds for refusal?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to propose that we refuse this application because it fails on a number of significant policy grounds as follows. It is not compliant with either current or emerging policy on the provision of social rent housing. We have a loss of retail, a loss of B1 space, which is not normally acceptable under our policies. We don't believe that there has been enough protection given to the protected.
Sorry, you have to be rather specific. You don't believe, you have to
be quite clear as to where we have failed to protect the
protected characteristics. We have failed to protect the protected characteristics of the traders by there is insufficient evidence that the traders who have protected characteristics have been fully...
in what sense? Where have we failed?
Well, they have made it very clear that they have not received an adequate offer from Delancey and or whoever, Elephant and Castle Properties and Co Limited.
They failed to...
It is a condition, or it is in our policy, is it in the Elephant and Castle SPD, we have it in policy that we have to make that the developer has to make a reasonable offer to the existing traders because of the protected characteristics, and they haven't got a full reallocation strategy. They still don't know. They still have got no agreements. There's a lot that is being left to be dealt with.
And we've done that in the past.
Well, the Section 106, I mean, there are so many things to be done in the Section 106, to be honest.
Might I suggest that the ground could be that the displacement of the traders disproportionately affects those protected characteristics?
There's also the non-compliant with the covenants policy.
The covenants, yeah.
And there's also an issue of protected characteristics to do with the users of the leisure facilities on the site as well, which I would suggest is in the same terms, but for users and leisure facilities.
Okay.
And they do not meet the required carbon emissions.
You weren't happy with the explanation?
Not really, no. I mean, it is a new development. And
so, not really happy with.
No,
I'm not happy. You have to be very clear.
Apologies, yes. I'm not happy with.
You have to make sure that officers are very clear that this committee does not agree that we have met the carbon emissions criteria in this way.
As required in policy.
No, they have. Yeah, no, we are making the decision that they have not made it, and officers have to defend that position should they go to an inspector, or if they go to, and I assume this has a GLA, and the GLA will be watching the outcome of this, and they have a role in some form of determination. We have to be incredibly clear as to why that is why we are rejecting it.
Can I add some more rounds?
Well, I was going to say, they've also failed to meet policy on the provision on site of children's play space.
Children's play space.
Go on, Hamish, you can take over now.
The scheme as proposed fails to adequately assess or provide for parking provision stemming from the scheme. It
So I
also
didn't quite catch.
parking provision.
What's failed?
That there's been no assessment made of the impact of parking needs originating from the scheme on the neighbouring streets.
So you were
the applicants admitted during the evening that they had not conducted any analysis of the impact that the scheme would have on parking in the nearby residential streets.
That you have to be very clear then that you are discounting the advice that the applicant gave, that across the industry there would not be such a assessment, and on the basis of your understanding, you are breaking out of what would be the norms. Policy references.
I mean, I would say just on the parking point that we do quite often have, from my recollection anyway, that sort of information for schemes coming to the coming to this committee. I mean, I'm happy to be corrected on that, but I'm pretty certain that we do often have information about the impact of parking originating from schemes on the wider area.
That's okay, you carry on.
The servicing provision is inadequate for the extent of the residential, retail and educational provision on the site. I don't think... Carry on,
Yeah, well, I was going to say loss of amenity for the Osborne Street residents on the daylight and sunlight, the impact of the daylight and sunlight on the residents in Osborne Street, leading to a loss of amenity.
Paragraph 557, no agreement with TfL for the new transport infrastructure.
I'm not entirely sure whether that's a plan. However, that'll be for the inspector or the GLA to come to conclusion as to the... Speak up, Nick.
Yeah, no, that'll become... officers will include that. The list is now getting extraordinarily long. Well, far be it from me to... We then have to have an explanation as to what the consequences will be should we... Sorry? Me? Can I just finish what you're going to say? We then have to... Sorry?
The decision's been made, I believe.
No.
Just to clarify to everyone, the decision was taken in relation to a proposal to approve the application. That was not, it did not reach a majority. So that has not been granted. There's no resolution to grant planning permission. You've now got to consider whether or not there is a majority to refuse the application. That is a different resolution, and it's quite proper for the committee to consider that separately.
Where is she?
We can have a vote. The quorum for this committee is actually 2. One member's had to go on medical grounds, so that is not an issue. Clearly, she cannot vote on the second vote, but bearing in mind she abstained on the first vote, I don't think that's going to be too much it doesn't look as though it's going to be too much of an issue. So it's quite proper for the committee to consider this.
Democrats, aren't you? You're a Democrat. You're supposed to be a lawyer. You're a Democrat. You're a lawyer, you are.
What the first resolution failed. Now it's a question of whether or not the committee decides to refuse. Now there is a blatant difference between that, and hopefully people can understand that.
Sorry, you may not be happy with the advice, but that is the advice that you have, and this is the process that we have to go through. As we have gone through all the part before this, we also have to talk about the consequences at some stage of what happens if we do not agree this. And I also have to point out before we go into a short recess, because I think we need to take some advice. I think we should go into a recess to be able to Okay. We have to. Sorry, everyone has actually been very open to having this discussion in public. As a consequence of the decision that's been taken in not agreeing the motion to approve it, we now have to have the discussion as to the motion to refuse it. This is part and parcel of the same process and is laid out in all the information that you have before you.
Double voting.
The next bit is we do have to take advice as to what happens if we do refuse this, because we have to be clear about that. And I also have to point out that over time, through a whole range of applications, and I have no doubt applications that are going to come to us in the future, a lot of those decisions will take weight into the benefits of the scheme against the harms of the scheme, and the weight about how policy compliant they may or may not be if the benefits that accrue outweigh the harms. And that is something that's part of this Planning Committee's role. I now suggest that we take a short break for Planning Committee members to take advice from the legal officer and the planner. Is that agreed?
In public, in public, in
So that's what we're going to do. Yeah, no, the whole. We'll go out and we'll go and take some.
You cannot decide if you have closed doors and you don't have a meeting.
I don't think it's appropriate to have that discussion taking place outside.
Nobody is late.
We're going into closed session to take advice.
You take your impeachment.
You see, nothing normally gets confused here. That's why it's thrown into
This never happens.
what to do when something actually gets confused.
And it's a good
I've still got colleagues watching.